Now, to begin. Yes, actually, I'm formerly of UMass Lowell. I am now an elderly retired person. So on the top of each image are 3 numbers. The first one, 90, that's the sequence number. 1 is the number of the program that produced the image. And the other number here is its aesthetic score, which I'll explain in a moment. Next slide, come on. Okay, the app does 4 things. It generates source images. It applies filters to the images. It rates the quality of the resulting images. And it displays images and makes videos using them. Just to give a rough idea of what it does, I'll go through here a selection of images that were created with several versions of the app starting in 2018. And I'll go through them fairly quickly. Meanwhile, new images are being generated on the right as we speak. The app will also generate short video clips. This is a simulated disco ball lamp. Okay, each cycle of image generation begins with a so-called source image. And I use 3 different kinds. First, computer-generated source images, like that, and that one. And also, somewhat less frequently, I use photographs. I found that urban scenes work pretty well, as do certain country scenes. And occasionally I'll use some manually created art, drawing, painting, or a sketch. Okay. So I'd like to take you through one cycle of image generation to show how the app works. As you say, we always start with a source image, in this case, a photograph. And as I go through the remaining filters, try to remember the blue background around the young woman, the red hair, the white blouse, and her skin tone, because those things are all going to change and disappear fairly quickly. Okay, the first filter I apply is glass tiles. And you can see the blue background is still there. Her hair color is still there. And down here along the bottom, I think you have some mixture of her blouse and her skin tone. Next filter converts Cartesian to polar coordinates. I can put the origin of the system anywhere I want. Right now it's in the upper left corner. Very often I put it in the center, but in fact I could put it anywhere on the image. Wallpaper simply makes replicas of the preceding image. I rotate the whole thing counterclockwise 90 degrees. Then I invert, and this operation requires a little explanation. In this context, inversion means that pixels near the edges of the image are moved in toward the center, and at the same time, images near the center are moved out toward the edges. In effect, it's pulling the image inside out. I can distort the image. This just wiggles the image up and down and side to side. And finally, I recolor the image. In this case, I'm using a color scheme borrowed from a painting by the French artist Eric Lepape. There are actually 2 ways I can recolor a picture, I can choose a color map. There are about 200 available in my app. Or you can do what I just did, that is you can borrow the palette of an existing image. And it's important to note that this operation does not copy any image content from one image to the other. It's purely a transfer of the color scheme of one image to another image. Okay, now I'll run through a brief overview of the innards of the app. The graphical user interface is about 3,000 lines of MATLAB code, most of which were generated by MATLAB's built-in app designer, which I'll come back to in a moment. And there are about 350 functions that implement the actual functionality of the app. Most of those functions are just a few lines of code. Filters, there are 45 so-called geometric filters. These transform image shapes. There are 21 post-processing filters. These are for modifying contrast, lighting, or tone of an existing image. And there are over 100 compositing or blending modes. The post-processing filters and the blending modes would be familiar to any user of Photoshop or GIMP or Krita. Programming is mostly a matter of just setting up a sequence of filters. You can specify any number of filters in any order, and any repeats are allowed. There are 32 presets. These are pre-programmed combinations of filters that I've found generally produce pleasing images. The images you see here over on the right are all generated by a preset, which, as they say here, is selected with a single mouse click. So, for example, this image is just generated by, by preset 13. Got ahead of me there. Okay, for each image generated, the app calculates what I call an aesthetic score. And it uses this score to determine whether to accept an image or to discard it. The threshold, the decision threshold, can be set to any value that you like. I found that images that have scores between 1 and 4, and what do we have up here? 1.876. Okay, so that would be considered an acceptable image. Okay, images between 1 and 4, but I usually set my working threshold to 10, much higher. This lets some bad images through, but it also completely rejects useless images like visual noise, all black or all white images, images with too little contrast, and so on. Setting the image at 10 also allows some otherwise rejectable images that are actually good through. So images between 4 and 10 can get through. Okay, I implemented the app in MATLAB for 3 reasons. First of all, the MAT in MATLAB stands for matrix, a 2-dimensional array of data. And of course, an image can be represented as a 2-dimensional array of data. So that makes available MATLAB's hundreds of built-in matrix functions, which can make the coding of many image processing operations very simple. Second, MATLAB offers several specialized toolboxes. These contain the operations needed for work in particular domains. I mostly use the image processing and signal processing toolboxes. And finally, this was the cruncher for me, the integrated app designer. With the app designer, I created this interface without writing a single line of code. I just dragged widgets over here and dropped them in place. And at the same time, the app designer allowed me to fill in these text fields, and it allowed me to fill in these numeric fields together with information about the allowed range of values in those fields and whether I wanted the numbers rounded off or not. And the app designer also lets me set the initial states of these checkboxes. Okay, I thought the question of AI might come up. Many of the preceding teachers have mentioned it. For me, a neural net would have been a good choice for the image evaluator, but I found it very difficult to define the output classes. You know, how should I specify what constitutes a good image in some simple way? And I found my own artistic criteria were unstable. While I was reviewing sequences of hundreds of images, I discovered that I often gave different scores to repeats of the same image. And I really do want an image evaluator that works. And the reason is that to get a single good image, I typically have to do runs of dozens of images and then evaluate those that come above my rejection threshold one by one. Very tedious process that I'd rather have automated if possible. For the future, I see three things that I need to do. First, expand the source, a set of source image generators. There are currently 16, and they simply don't provide enough variety. I'd also like to add more post filters like the details filters in GIMP GMIC, if you're familiar with those filters. And finally, I need to rewrite the entire app in object-oriented form. The reason is that right now it violates the first rule of interface design, which is all interaction must go through the interface. This isn't possible because most of the interesting computing done by the app is done by functions that are not members of the app class. Okay, that concludes my presentation of my app. A few acknowledgements here. I also write about my app and other issues on Artique. And finally, special thanks to my friend, mentor, and fellow artist, Anna Urson. Thank you.